Thank you very much for joining me today. It's a great honor to speak with you, Bishop Williamson, and to gain some insights into matters concerning tradition and the current crisis within the Church. My first question, if you please, is it possible to draw a parallel between the punishments imposed on Archbishop Viganò and Archbishop Lefebvre?
Yes. They're both being punished for keeping the true faith and rejecting the false change at the time of Vatican II. Archbishop Viganò has taken a longer time to see it because for years he was, for tens of years, he was deceived by his colleagues because he could not believe, this is his own explanation, he could not believe that his colleagues were wanting to destroy the Church. And so he did not believe it, he could not believe it. But when he faced the corruption that he met with as nuncio in the United States in the early 2000s, he had to recognize that the corruption was terrible, and he had to admit, he had to, working out where it came from, he had to face up to the fact that it was Vatican II that had loosened the religion, relaxed the true religion, and allowed the devil into the Church. And in a way that he'd never before, in 2,000 years, never before had the devil had such success in corrupting the Church. But that's because of the corruption of our times. But he arrived at the same conclusions as Archbishop Lefebvre. He said, the arguments of Archbishop Lefebvre are mine, the ideas, I share his ideas, I share his arguments, I share his conclusions. It's he that was right, and the rest of us were at that time wrong. And it's because he denounced, and he denounces very clearly, the errors of Vatican II and the errors of the clergy, of all of the priests and bishops and cardinals and popes, all of them following this wrong tendency that Archbishop Lefebvre denounced 20 years earlier, or 30 years earlier. He found himself arriving at the same conclusions, and he's arrived at the same false excommunication or apparent excommunication, which is no such thing, because it has no foundation. Because Archbishop Viganò is not betraying the Church, he's helping to rescue the Church, like Archbishop Lefebvre. So yes, there's a very considerable parallel between the two. They're both punished for the same false, non-existent crime of infidelity to the Church.
Perfect. So, moving on, do you have anything to say about Sister Agnes Sasagawa, who passed away this year? The lady of the apparition of Akita.
I met her twice, at least twice, if not 3 times in Japan, because when I came across the message, the third message that she received in 1973, it struck me very much as true. And when I was in the Far East, I made a point of going to visit her. And she received me at least twice. I say 2 or 3 times, I'm not sure, but at least twice. She received me very kindly, and we talked. And she didn't know too much about Archbishop Lefebvre to begin with, but then I had a lay friend in Japan who I think came to know her quite well, came to meet her quite often, came to know her quite well. And he presented to her the ideas of Archbishop Lefebvre, which he knew of. And I think she was impressed, and she reacted favorably, thanks to this lay friend, I do believe, Francis Fukushima. And through him, I think she came to appreciate the ideas of Archbishop Lefebvre, and I think she agreed with him to a great extent. It wasn't easy for her to accept that the Archbishop, so condemned by the official church, by the mainstream church, she still belonged to the normal church, and the official church, the conciliar church, as we call it, and she didn't find it too easy to accept that he was right. But I know that she was impressed, and that she came to know through Francis Fukushima, I think she came to know much better everything that he was saying. And then I remembered clearly that she was disappointed when I was thrown out by the Society of what seemed to be the Society of Archbishop Lefebvre. And I was thrown out because the society had departed from the line of Archbishop Lefebvre, and that was an extra thing for her to have to understand. But I know that she herself, of course, came into difficulties with the convent. I think she was thrown out of the convent and then kept in exile from her convent and from her sisters in the convent. And she died, of course, recently. But she had stayed faithful to the message. It was the sisters who were bullied by their bishop. And because the original bishop in Akita was Bishop John Shiro Ito, and he was good, but he was persecuted by his colleagues, and they wanted to shut down the convent or to shut down the message, because the message is the pure preconciliar religion. That's the third message of October 13th, 1973. And all of the Japanese fellow bishops of John Shiro Ito wanted to shut down that message because it was against the conciliar revolution. The Japanese Conference of Bishops was in favor of the conciliar revolution and therefore persecuted John Shiro Ito. He turned to Rome. He went to Rome. He flew to Rome to meet Cardinal Ratzinger, as he then was. Cardinal Ratzinger commented upon the message of October 1973 that it was the continuation of Fatima. It was a rerun of Fatima. Of course, there were three messages. The first was, I think, in June of 73. The second was in August of 73, and the third was in October of 73. And that third message of Akita was pure preconciliar Catholicism, the true Catholicism, not the false conciliar Catholicism, or the bogus Catholicism of the Council. So John Shiro Ito died in, I think it was 1984, but not before in 1982 he had been able to declare, as the local bishop who is competent in such things, that there was nothing that Catholics could take seriously and believe in. If they wanted to, Catholics could believe in the messages of Akita. So John Shiro Ito succeeded in giving official approval to Akita before he died. But once he died, the next bishop was not in line with the old Catholicism, the true Catholicism. He was in line with the new Catholicism, and therefore she came under difficulties because she remained faithful to the messages. She remained faithful, with the help of Francis Fukushima, to the content of those messages. I think she never betrayed them. But she was booted out of the convent and had difficulty finding refuge outside the convent with friends or with any sisters. I think there was one sister who also left at the same time, maybe to help look after her because she was already growing old. She was not old in 1973, but she was old in 2024. And so she died this year after a number of years not easy, but she died faithful. I remember her quite well. And I remember being favorably impressed. She was a very honest and simple soul, not stupid, but wishing to remain faithful to Mother Church, to the true Church, and who succeeded to a great extent in doing so. So I do have memories of Sister Sasagawa, and good memories. May she rest in peace.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I appreciate our talks on that, and it's very impressive that a laywoman that had no contact with the most of people studied about Archbishop Lefebvre and find out he was right on his undoings. That's good, a good sign.
Yes.
So my third question is about the recent passing of the Bishop Tissier. What role would you say he played in the fight for tradition?
He played an important part. He made, in his life, he made several serious contributions to the Society of Pius X. I just wrote in a recent Eleison comments about him, and I quoted 3 serious contributions that he made to the society. And there are more than 3, but there are these 3 at least. And the first was that he and another young Frenchman were very early seminarians. I think the very first intake, which may have been in 1968 or 69, I'm not quite sure in my mind, 68 or 69, the Archbishop launched the seminary in, I think, 1968 in Fribourg, Switzerland. But at the end of that first year, so many seminarians, so many of the very first seminarians left, that the Archbishop very nearly gave up trying to build a seminary. But then there are 2 French seminarians of that very first year who persuaded him to continue. They persuaded him to keep trying, and sure enough, that I think was in the summer of 1969. Sure enough, in the autumn of 69, there was another good intake of seminarians, easily enough to persuade the Archbishop that he should continue, but he nearly gave up. He must have thought that it would be a waste of time and that there weren't going to be any serious number of seminarians. But in that autumn, there were a serious number again. And so the Archbishop continued. Now, he might not have continued if the young Frenchman, Bernard Tissier de Mallerais, and another young Frenchman, Paul Lanier, if the two of them hadn't persuaded him, he might have given up then and there. And if he had given up, what would have happened to tradition in the church? It might almost have disappeared. As it was, the Archbishop continued, and I think the very next year, he moved from Fribourg to Écône because he found these buildings, friends of tradition, which was not even yet really a movement in the church, not a self-conscious movement, but there were a group of 5 laymen, not the least laymen, who got together and bought the buildings of the chanoines, the canons of the St. Bernard Pass, the ones with the big floppy dogs with brandy under their neck, carrying brandy under their neck to foot passengers stranded in the snow, walking over the Alps to Italy or from Italy to Switzerland. The canons had these buildings which they no longer needed or used. Those terrible 1960s when the church was really beginning to collapse. And so many buildings were coming free, and the canons no longer needed these buildings in the canton of the Valley. And so he moved from Fribourg, because Fribourg had been a very good Dominican university. The Dominicans, of course, are famous for the true Dominicans are famous for their doctrine, going back to St. Thomas Aquinas. And they had a good university in Fribourg, which is why the Archbishop started in Fribourg, Switzerland, because he wanted his seminarians to be able to go to a good university. But by the end of the 1960s, the university was failing, like so many institutions of the church were failing, convents and monasteries and seminaries and universities. All of these Catholic institutions were going crazy with the false Catholicism being forced upon them by misguided popes and misguided cardinals and misguided bishops. And therefore, he gave up on Fribourg and he didn't. He was invited by these Swiss laymen in the canton of the Valley to make use of the building that they owned. And it's only after a certain time that he paid them back and bought from them, or they gave to him, I forget. They gave to him the property after a certain time so that he would be independent on his own. And he moved to Switzerland. And that's when the seminary, year after year, began to take off, until 1974, when Rome began to close in on him and to try to make him shut down his seminary and to make him change from the old Mass to the new religion, because the old Mass is the heart of the old religion. The new Mass is at the heart of the new religion. And the old religion is centered on God. The new religion centers on man. And the Archbishop said that the new Mass is unacceptable. The new religion is unacceptable. I'm continuing with the old religion. And that's when Rome began to see what he was doing and began to close in on him. In 1975, he had to face a kangaroo court of 3 cardinals in Rome. In 1976, when he insisted on ordaining a significant group of seminarians, that was 12 seminarians, that he ordained priests in the hot summer of 1976, when he clashed head-on with Rome. But the Archbishop stayed his course. He could see. He had a strong faith, and he was defending the faith. And his seminarians were becoming priests, and they would defend the faith that he defended following his great example. And that was when Rome seriously condemned the society in the summer of 1976. That was Paul VI. But the Archbishop stayed on his course, and he preferred the faith to false obedience, the true faith to false obedience. To obey these authorities going so deeply and completely wrong on the faith, the very faith, the very Catholic faith was at stake. The church was being shaken to its foundations by modernism, by the idea of adapting God's church to man's desires. No, you can't do that. You can't do that. The church is for God to be able to save souls and bring them into his heaven, to be happy with him forever, to be blissfully happy with him forever. That's what the faith is all about, the salvation of souls. And here is modern Rome saying, no, we're going to save the modern world. We're going to save the devil's world. And the devil was inside the church, and the devil was wreaking havoc, causing havoc. Terribly serious, but Pope Paul VI couldn't understand. He did not understand. He was a liberal. He believed in the modern world. He believed in the church, but he also believed in the modern world, which is contradictory. You can't mix oil and water. You can put the two oil and water in the same bottle, the same quantities. You can shake the bottle furiously for 2 minutes. The oil and water will mix for 2 minutes, but the moment you stop shaking the bottle, they will separate again, because oil is lighter than water. Oil will not mix with water because it's much less heavy. Water is comparatively heavy. The two will not mix. You can artificially force them together for a little while, but very soon after you stop shaking, the oil and water will separate again. The modern world is based on godless principles: liberty, equality, fraternity, freedom, religious liberty, ecumenism. Is based on false principles, and the modern world is godless. The true Catholic religion is godly, and the two will not mix. But that's what Paul VI was trying to do, because he believed in both. He believed both in the godless world and in the godly religion. He didn't realize he was in contradiction. He thought he could mix the two, but he couldn't. He can't. There's no man on earth that can make our oil and water mix, unless he's got the help of the devil to keep them mixed. But by themselves, they separate. The modern world has chosen a godless path. It's turning away from God all the time, everywhere. It wants to live for the pleasures of man. It wants to live for pleasure and without the 10 Commandments. The modern world does not want God. That world cannot have Catholicism adapted to it, which was the basis of the conciliar revolution at Vatican II. And so the conciliar revolution of Vatican II is constantly failing. But the churchmen can't see it. They are blinded by the glamorous modern world. But they haven't got the faith. They're losing the faith, and they want to lose the faith. It's very strange, it's very serious, but that's just how it is. So what can you do? You go on fighting for the true faith, and you have to fight against the church authorities, at least for the time being, until it will become clear to everybody that the council was wrong, that it was trying to mix oil and water, and that it cannot be done. The modern world and the Catholic religion cannot be mixed. The true Catholic religion is bound to condemn the false modern world. The two cannot mix. But men dream of mixing it because they dream of having things their own way, of there being no 10 Commandments, of there being no God who commands them not to do things, not to do certain things. So what can you do? You have to fight the good fight, as St. Paul says. I have fought the good fight. I have, how does he say it? I've kept the faith. I've fought the good fight, and the Lord God will reward me, and that's the truth. If we stick to the truth and live by the truth and obey the Ten Commandments, we will go to heaven, and we'll be happy with God forever.
So thank you for these sayings about the crisis and about Tissier de Mallerais. And continuing on the same topic, in my next question, if you allow me, is to ask about the society plans to. Are they going to take long before consecrating new bishops, or do you foresee this happening in the near future?
The society changed course from the Archbishop's course that he set for it from the 1960s. He foresaw that he was going to be in trouble with the official church. It began to happen in 1974. In 1976, he was suspended. In 1988, he was suspended in inverted commas because it was a church judgment without foundation. It was a false church judgment. It was a false judgment of the official church. The church can occasionally, sometimes, get into trouble. And this trouble was brewing. The liberalism was a problem going way back to the French Revolution and even before in 1789. That's when liberalism really broke out in Europe and triumphed in a certain way. And from then on, liberalism was infecting the bloodstream of Europe, of Catholic Europe, and of the world. And throughout the 19th century, there was a great battle between liberalism and Catholicism, because liberalism was trying to mix Catholicism with the Protestant world, with the half-Protestant world. It was trying to mix Catholicism and Protestantism. That again cannot work. Take a motor car. It doesn't take much water to stop the petrol from burning. In other words, to stop the car from moving, stop the engine from working. You cram 2 snowballs into the petrol tank, the gas tank of a motor car, and 2 snowballs will usually be enough to stop the car working. Because again, you can't mix water and petrol if you want the car to work. So you can't mix liberalism and Catholicism if you want the Catholic Church to work. So there was a long struggle between liberalism and Catholicism through the 19th century. Come into the 20th century, there was a great Catholic Pope, St. Pius X, chosen by Archbishop Lefebvre as the patron of his new society, because Pius X understood that you can't run a car on water. You can run a car on petrol, but you can't run it on water. And liberalism was water in the church's gas tank. So Pius X took a firm stand against modernism. He diagnosed the disease. He knew that it was modern philosophy, stupid, idiotic modern philosophy, liberal philosophy, which was producing this disaster in the church. He condemned modernism. He made clear what it's all about. He made clear that it was impossible to run the church on modernism. He condemned the modernists, but they simply went underground. When he died in 1914 out of a broken heart because he was unable to stop the First World War from breaking out, he left the church in good shape. The official church was in good shape, but there were a lot of liberals in the church. thinking they could combine their Catholic faith with their modern living. They couldn't, because the Catholic faith has 10 commandments and modern living has no commandments. So he left the church officially in good shape. But what happened was that the liberals simply went underground and waited until they could come up again and triumph, because the world is getting more and more corrupt, going more and more liberal. And sure enough, that happened at the end of the 1950s. Pope Pius XII was a pope of the old kind. He was good, a good pope, but he was upholding the church against a large number of his cardinals and bishops who were all turning to modernism as the solution for the church to exist in the modern world. And it's the wrong solution. Even an Archbishop Viganò, who's a very intelligent man, could not understand to begin with what was really going on. The one who understood what was going on and just how great the danger was for the Catholic Church was Archbishop Lefebvre. And he understood because he knew his doctrine. He knew what the popes throughout the 19th century had taught, the great anti-liberal Catholic popes, who from the 1830s denounced clearly, even before the 1830s, but at least in 1832, Gregory XVI condemned clearly in Mirari Vos, his encyclical called Mirari Vos, 1832, he condemned clearly the liberalism. He said, these are false principles and they will destroy the church. And he was followed, Gregory XVI was followed in 1846 by Pope Pius IX, the longest reigning pope of all church history, for 38 years, from 1846 to 1878. And this Pope Pius IX, to begin with, was also being deceived by the liberals. But in 1848, there broke out in Rome a terrible revolution by the enemies of the church, which drove him out of Rome. It took 18 months for him to be able to come back to Rome, but when he came back, he was a sadder and wiser man. He had seen the sweet, nice liberals in action, murdering his prime minister, Count Rossi, under his eyes. And Pope Pius IX was under no more illusions when he came back about how sweet and nice the liberals are. They're not sweet and nice at all. They've got their hands covered in blood. They love abortion. Abortion is one of the liberal sacraments of their false religion. And their hands are dripping with blood. That's liberals. We've seen it again just recently in this American election, where Kamala Harris was just crazy with the same liberal ideas, which are now woke ideas, which are simply sick, stupid, and sick. Thanks be to God, the Americans voted for Trump instead of Harris. Whatever one may think about Trump, at least he's not woke. He's not a crazy liberal. He may have his faults, but he's got a good dose of old-fashioned common sense. And it's a grace of God that he was elected this time. Unfortunately, he doesn't really understand the war between liberals and non-liberals. He's a decent man. Basically, he's a decent man, but he's an ignorant man. He doesn't understand the basic war, which is a religious war. This always the same religious war between the devil on one side and our Lord Jesus Christ on the other side. He has sympathies for Christ, which is good. At the end of his previous presidency, he had a band playing Christmas carols in the White House, which is fairly remarkable for the White House, which has had many liberal presidents in it. A lot of Americans believe in liberalism, but they also still have some common sense, and therefore they didn't elect Kamala Harris, thanks be to God. And we got a reprieve of maybe 1 or 2 or 3 years, I don't know. Personally, I still think that the Third World War must come as a punishment, but the world is not yet quite wicked enough for that punishment to arrive, but I think it's still on its way. The liberals are being, they're weeping all over the place. They are angry, they're upset, their sweet ideas, their sweet, nice ideas are being contradicted by the American people. They will work twice as hard, probably, in order to rot the American people sufficiently that the American people will appoint a woke president. And then the United States will commit suicide. Woke ideas are stupid and wicked. And, liberty from God, liberty from God's order, liberty from God's 10 Commandments. It makes no sense. But that's what the devil is driving humanity into, and that's what will drive humanity crazy. And then comes the Third World War. And then, when Almighty God says, that's enough, all right, children, now learn the real truth. Bang, bang, bang. The whole system will crash, and people will realize that liberalism does not work. We haven't been given existence by God in order to become liberals, but in order to become Catholics, obeying his religion, following his divine Son, accepting Jesus Christ as God, and following the Catholic Church, set up by Jesus Christ to save our souls. That's what we're here on this earth for, to save our souls and be happy with God forever. We're not here to be liberals and make complete fools of ourselves, demonic fools. There is a devil, there is a hell, and God gives us free will, and if we really want, he allows us to follow the devil, but we will pay the price, and that will be falling into hell for eternal torments. God is not mocked, and God is not silly. He's not a liberal. That's what people think he is. He is most merciful, most good, but he's not silly. And he is not mocked. But he's being mocked all over the world by these liberals who are defiant, demonic, crazy, and silly. I'm sorry, I've forgotten your question.
My question was about if you foresee in the consecration of bishops on the part of the society in the future.
I beg your pardon. I've gone completely off the question. Everything I say, I think, has been true, but it wasn't answering your question. I don't think the new society, will ever consecrate bishops, because the new society took over from the society in about 2012, when there was a general chapter of the society, and instead of, the Archbishop always said, there is nothing to be hoped for from these liberal Romans. These Romans are liberals. They've condemned me all the way. They don't understand Catholicism. They have lost the Catholic faith. The popes and the bishops and the cardinals have lost the Catholic faith. That's what he said. My friends, he said it in a retreat he gave half a year before he died. He said, they have lost the faith. C'est certain. Certain is in French. Certain. Certain. He said it 4 times, as if he was just driving himself to recognize the facts. These Catholics, supposed Catholics, have lost what makes them Catholic. Therefore, they cannot be listened to, they cannot be relied upon, they cannot be trusted. They are out to destroy the faith. We saw recently Pope Francis condemning the true Mass and doing his utmost with Traditionis Custodes, a declaration saying we've got to shut down the old Mass, which is the true Mass. In other words, we've got to empty out the Catholic faith from what remains of the Catholic Church. And of course, the Catholic Church without the Catholic faith is nothing. It's the faith that makes the Church. And the Archbishop said clearly, these men no longer have the faith. They cannot be trusted. Therefore, he said that there can be no practical agreement without a doctrinal agreement. Well, in the early 2000s, the Society held theological discussions with the Romans, 4 theologians on each side, and the result of the discussions was that you can't mix oil and water. That was 2011, 2012. Then came the general chapter of the Society, which is the meeting of the 40 most important priests in the Society. And at that meeting, the decision was taken under the guidance of Bishop Foley, who was the Superior General at the time, the successor of the Archbishop at the head of the Society. And the Society, this official meeting of the Society said, a practical agreement is impossible. A doctrinal agreement is impossible. Therefore, we must have a practical agreement. The Archbishop had said, if there cannot be a doctrinal agreement, then there cannot be a practical agreement, because the Catholic Church rests on doctrine, on teaching, the teaching of certain great supernatural truths which cannot be changed, which come from God and cannot be changed. And they are at the heart of the Catholic religion. Modern man comes along and says, oh, no, we can come to a practical agreement without a doctrinal agreement. It's a completely different understanding of doctrine. But doctrine is at the heart of the Church. Therefore, the Society, which was taking the position that we don't need doctrine, what we need is a practical agreement. If we have to do without doctrine, we like doctrine, we're clinging to doctrine, but doctrine is not that important. What is important is a practical agreement. They were not following the path of the Archbishop. They were trusting these Romans, and they've been trusting them ever since. And to this day, the leadership of the Society of St. Pius X is following this new line. It is such a new line, it is so different that you have to call it no longer the Society, but the New Society. Just like you have to call the official church not the church, but the new church, because the principles of the new church are liberal, they're not Catholic. And this position of the Society taken in 2012 is no longer as Catholic as the Archbishop was. The new Society has not yet abandoned the true Mass. It has not yet accepted Vatican II, but they are trying to come to an understanding with people who do believe in the new Mass and believe in the believe in Vatican II. New Mass, new doctrine. That's these Romans. So the leadership of the Society of St. Pius X took a bad turn in 2012, which means that it can no longer be called the Society. It needs, like the church needs to be called, the modernized church needs to be called the new church, the modernized society needs to be called the new society. And this new society wants the official approval of the Romans. The Archbishop said, these Romans cannot be trusted. And Pope Francis is worse than Pope Benedict XVI or any of his predecessor popes. He's the worst, you might argue, the worst of the 6 conciliar popes, the 6 popes since John the 23rd, including John the 23rd. So, society is now on the wrong track. And on that track, it has to stay friendly with the Romans. It has to respect these apostate Romans, these Romans fallen away from the faith. It has to do, as far as possible, what these Romans want. It wants to stay friends with the Romans. It wants to be nicey-nicey with the Romans. And therefore, it's not going to make bishops without the Romans' approval.
Continue. Sorry, I were interrupted.
That's all right. That's all right. You've got a house and a home and people. So I don't think the society is able to change. It's set up on this path for the time being. And it does not look like it's going to come back to the line of Archbishop Lefebvre. It's trying to mix oil with water. It's trying to mix the faith of Archbishop Lefebvre with the unfaith of the Romans. It can't be done. It can't be done. These Romans are too far gone.
If you allow me, an eventual consecration of bishops in some way would validate your decision to consecrate bishops and establish the resistance in 2012. Like Bishop Tissier de Mallerais consecrated Bishop Licínio Rangel in 1991. Don't you think that way? That they would validate your decisions if they consecrate a new bishop without permission of Rome?
Well, it would validate it would validate the position of the Archbishop Lefebvre, but that's no longer their position. They pretend to be following Archbishop Lefebvre, but they're not. He said, these Romans cannot be trusted, my friends. It's certain, 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 certain. And now the society has changed course. It's no longer clearly opposed to these apostates in Rome, these men fallen away, these churchmen fallen away from the faith. It's saying these men fallen away from the faith can be trusted to look after the faith and to keep the faith and to encourage the faith. And it's not true. Archbishop Viganò has found that at last, after a long time, recognized that it's not true. But Archbishop Viganò for a long time was fooled. That's how powerful the deceit is. He was deceived. And he's an intelligent man. He has the Catholic faith without any doubt. He makes magnificent declarations. He's defending the faith against the New World Order. Is there any other Catholic bishop in the world saying the things that he's saying so clearly against the enemies of the faith? No, there isn't. The Catholic bishops are blind. They're foolish. The official Catholic bishops are blind and foolish. They don't understand modernism. They're victims of it themselves. And I think that's true of the leadership of the Society of Pius X. It's the new society because it's changed course from the Archbishop. It says the faith is no longer something that cannot be defended by these Romans. The faith is something that can be defended by these Romans. It's a different idea of the Catholic faith. And it's no longer the clear and honest and true idea of the Catholic faith that was held by the Archbishop. So I don't think they're going to ever be able to consecrate bishops. I don't think they'll be able, in the way that the Archbishop did, in defiance of their prohibition. Because Rome will never approve of a defender of the faith, a defender of the true faith, because Rome is in the grip of the enemies of the church, the Judeo-Masons, Freemasonry, which is out to destroy the Catholic Church. Let me backtrack one moment. There was a high-up priest, quite important priest, not one of the most important, but a quite important priest in the society, who recently said in a private meeting, the question came up, do you think that there will be bishops consecrated by the society in defiance of the Roman officials? And this priest, still a member of the society, of the new society, said, I don't think there will be any consecrations because the young priests of the society would not understand. Now, that's a significant statement. It's an interesting statement. It's a significant statement. And it rings true because the society is now, it has seminaries. in 4 languages: Spanish, German, English, and French. And in all of those seminaries, the youngsters, the new seminaries, the new vocations are being formed in obedience to society, the new society policy. So they're being told the Romans are nice. The Romans mean well. They're a bit misguided for the moment, but we can trust them. And so we're waiting for official approval to be able to consecrate bishops. That's the doctrine in which, that's the teaching or doctrine in which the young society priests are now formed. And with that doctrine, they will not be able to understand Rome being defied or the Romans being defied. They won't understand. They will say, all of our seminary, all of our 6 years in the seminary, you've been teaching us the Romans can and must be trusted. And now you're saying they can't be trusted because you're consecrating bishops without their approval. It's an interesting statement. He said, I don't think the young priests will not understand if the society now goes ahead. It'll be contradicting everything that we've been taught throughout our seminary in the new society. The new society is not the old society. It's a different society. It's very upsetting to have to think that, but that's the truth. All right, now, the consecrations of Bishop Bellini, Bishop Stobnitsky, I think is the correct pronunciation. He's a Polish priest, a Polish bishop, and Father Morgan, who is English. The consecration of Bishop Stobnitsky was in public. It was in Poland, in front of a private congregation. Well, it was of about 30 people. So that's because these people have understood the whole situation. The Polish people, the Polish resistance, congregations that have been built up by Bishop Stobnitsky and who understand the problem of the resistance. So he would have support for doing what he's doing. I knew before I consecrated him that he would have the proper support, that he had been building up congregations which understanding properly, correctly, the whole problem, and that he would not be on his own. He would not be floating around with nobody following him. He's building up a following in Poland, and that's typical of Poland. It's one of the most faithful Catholic countries of all, and therefore he would not be on his own. So I consecrated him in front of a congregation of about 30 people, 30 of these Polish people who understood the whole situation. They don't hate the Pope, they respect the Pope, or even the man who seems to be the Pope, they respect. They're not, some of them may be sedevacantists, but they're not dogmatic sedevacantists. They're not foolish sedevacantists. They are people, they are Catholics who simply can't keep the faith if they have to believe that Pope Francis is Pope. So they, rather than lose the faith, they declare, they come to the conclusion he can't be Pope. Okay, I can understand that. I can sympathize with that. That's not completely unreasonable. On the contrary, there are quite a lot of reasons for it. So he had, Bishop Stobnitsky had people that I could rely upon to support him, no problem. Okay, now Bishop Morgan is English. He's stationed at the moment in France. In France, the people, the traditional Catholics, are not yet as clear in their minds. A lot of them are not yet as clear in their minds that the system is wrong, the Romans are not to be trusted, that the survival of the faith depends upon resistance bishops. The French people are not, many of them, clear enough yet in their minds, and therefore they won't support a resistance bishop. They don't understand the need. They don't yet understand the need. As events close in, if you know what I understand what I mean, as events become more and more dramatic, we have, I've said, a reprieve by this latest vote of the American people against wokery. That gives us a reprieve of maybe 1 or 2 or 3 years before the World War breaks out. It will break out, I do believe, as a punishment for our sins. But in the meantime, we have time. There's still time. But that also means that the French people will not yet understand, there won't be enough yet understanding why resistance bishops are necessary. A lot of them understand, but not all, by no means all. Or by no means all the traditional Catholics understand the need for resistance bishops. Archbishop Lefebvre understood it in 1988. That's because he had a special grace from God to understand the survival of the faith depends upon bishops, and bishops who are not semi-Roman or wanting to get official approval from Rome. Those bishops are sterilizing themselves. They're becoming sterile. Okay. Bishop Morgan sees this, and he himself preferred to be, he understood the need, the wisdom of accepting to be a bishop, but he didn't want it to be public to begin with because not enough French people yet understand. I think that's the truth. Okay? So I consecrated him in private in order that when he will be needed, when he will be really needed, a lot more people will understand why. At this moment, not enough people understand why. Therefore, he preferred to be consecrated in private, which is why I consecrated him in private. Okay? At his own wish. I can understand his wish. I think he's a good candidate. Many people, many traditional Catholics think he is a good candidate, but also they don't see, many of them do not yet see the need. If we can do without resistance bishops, it's better, they think. I think that it's necessary to place these bishops in circulation, to consecrate them, if necessary, clandestinely, so that they will be there when they are needed. When they are needed, it may be impossible to consecrate them. There may be no more planes flying in the sky. There may be no more possibility of crossing the English Channel. But now he is there, consecrated. And now, of course, everybody knows he's a bishop. But it may have been wise to consecrate him at that time when I did, so that he's there when he will be needed. The same with Bishop Bellini. Bishop Bellini has been in Ireland a resistance priest for possibly, I'm making a guess, 8 years by now. Possibly 8 years he's been in Ireland. He used to invite me over to Ireland when he was a priest and I was a bishop. Of course, I've been a bishop from 1988. So he used to invite me over quite often. I used to go over to give confirmation, to give conferences, to give lectures, and so on and so on. Now it's impossible for me to go over to Ireland because the Irish police are on his case for anti-Semitism and so on. So I can't go over to Ireland. So when he was here on a visit, I decided quite fast, since he was here and it was possible to consecrate him. COVID was going on at the time. So there was a risk of Ireland being, people were talking about a complete cut-off of Ireland from the world. There could have been, there might have been, because of COVID, a complete isolation of Ireland. Nobody allowed in, nobody allowed out. Okay?
Okay.
That being the threat, I then said, here he is in England. I've got an opportunity to put him in reserve, clandestinely, privately, without many people knowing, or the few people knowing, but not many, placing him inside Ireland like a good Trojan horse, to be able to look after the faith. If Ireland was completely cut off, they would still have a bishop there available to look after them. That's why I consecrated Father Bellini privately or clandestinely. Clandestinity is coming. Many people talk of the church having to go underground. Have you heard that being said? That the church may have to go underground. That means the church may have to go clandestine. All I'm doing is a little in advance of people realizing that clandestinity is necessary, and clandestinity is the way the church has got to go. That's the way things are. The catacombs, that's right. So all of these two bishops are Bishop Bellini and Bishop Morgan. They are merely advance examples of clandestinity, which the church may have to follow, because the situation is much worse than it was in the time of Archbishop Lefebvre. Archbishop Lefebvre said he consecrated in public. It was absolutely in public. There were journalists from all over the world, 300 journalists packed into a little cage almost, excuse me, like wild beasts. Because, excuse me, journalists are liberal. Excuse me. Journalists are the priests of liberalism. Can you understand that?
Yes, I understand perfectly. Here in Brazil is the same.
Liberalism is a religion. Liberalism is a false religion. The priests of this false religion are the journalists. Think about it. But anyway, it was like an arena of wild animals caged in a cage right next to the altar at the consecrations of 1988. It was quite an occasion. So I'm simply a bit ahead of I'm a long way behind Archbishop Lefebvre, but I'm a bit ahead of the church in the catacombs. But those two examples of clandestinity represent what may be coming, what may well be coming. Of course, it's not normal for Catholic bishops to be consecrated in private. Of course, it's not normal. But needs must, says the proverb. We're in a situation which is more and more grave day by day. Look at the craziness of Traditionis Custodes. The church authorities are going mad, completely mad. They're not defending the faith at all. They're undermining the faith. They are the chief enemies of the faith. The main officials of the Catholic Church, the main enemies of the faith. Can you believe it? But it's true. It's all around us. And Archbishop Viganò shows them up. He makes these magnificent declarations about the wickedness of the deep state and the deep church, and he compares the two. He's right. The enemies of God have succeeded in hollowing out the institutions, the Christian institutions of yesteryear, and these institutions are no longer Christian. They're no longer working for the faith, as all of the hospitals and law courts used to do in Christian countries. That's finished. The hospitals are a shell game, and they're turning into abortion centers. Hospitals, abortion centers. And the law courts, no longer the law or the truth, the law of God, but the law of man. God is nowhere in the hospitals and nowhere in the law courts. That's the situation of the law and medicine. And we saw what modern medicine has been, what the modern world is making of medicine. All of the doctors were for COVID, virtually. Not all by any means. But a lot of the doctors worked with the politicians in order to impose COVID and to make everybody get injections. And the lies were all over the place. Medicine for the good of people? No, medicine for depopulation. The murder of millions of people all over the world with these wretched vaccines supposed sins. The situation is serious. The law is gone, the medicine is gone, politics are gone. They're all just appearances of Christian institutions which are not Christian any longer at all. They're working for the devil. Politics for the devil. Look at the Democrats in the United States. Politics for the devil. Medicine for the devil, COVID. Law courts for the devil. These unjust laws, these godless laws. It's a situation which I know only one official bishop. No, he's not even official, of course. He's been excommunicated, Archbishop Viganò. He's been excommunicated now because the official church cannot tolerate him. It cannot tolerate true defenders of the faith, like Archbishop Lefebvre or Archbishop Viganò. Can't tolerate them.
And regarding Archbishop Viganò, whom Father Chazal last year called a bishop of the resistance, has his apparent turn towards sedevacantism impacted your relationship or contact with him in any way? What can we think about that? That's another question that I wrote here.
Well, the problem with sedevacantism is not that Pope Francis is as white as snow. It's not that the sedevacantists are telling, do not see a lot of true things about the church officials. The problem is when they make it a dogma. In other words, you cannot be a Catholic unless you are a sedevacantist. That's an exaggeration. That's a too serious exaggeration. I don't think that Archbishop Viganò thinks like that. I don't think he is what we would call a dogmatic sedevacantist. He has. I've met Archbishop Viganò at least 3 times, and he had what converted him from following Vatican II to no longer following Vatican II was his experience of the corruption in the United States when he was nuncio there, which is the Pope's man in the United States was Archbishop Viganò. That was Benedict XVI. And he was nuncio for a few years. And that's there that he ran into such corruption that he said, something here is seriously wrong. And he thought about it and he said, it must be Vatican II. But, and what changed him was his personal, direct, and bitter experience of the corruption following on Vatican II, which followed from the principles of Vatican II. Homosexuality in the clergy, in the bishops, amongst the bishops and the cardinals, serious sins, serious corruption at the very top of the church in the United States. It's that experience, personal, direct experience, which makes him a traditional Catholic. And from that experience, he finds it very difficult to believe that Pope Francis is really Pope. So he then begins to theorize and to work out how that can possibly be, and he is driven to believe that Francis is not Pope. But it's not, how can I say, it's not a sedevacantism in principle, it's a sedevacantism very much of practice. He's not a man of, he's not so much, Archbishop Viganò is not so much a man of theory as he is a man of practice. Okay, so it's a practical sedevacantism. It's not that theoretical kind of sedevacantism which becomes dogmatic. I don't think he's a dogmatic sedevacantist. I don't think he makes a dogma of it. It's just his own bitter experience, that's all, which has driven him. He's got, in a way, he's got no other way out than to think that Francis can't be Pope. But Archbishop Viganò has a sense of the church, and that's what sedevacantism at its worst undermines. At its worst, sedevacantism drives Catholics no longer to attend Mass because they say there are no more valid priests, there are no more valid bishops. The devil drives them, pushes them to exaggerate, until they finish in positions which are not Catholic, and they finish as what Americans call home aloners. In other words, people who practice their faith at home alone.
Ecclesiovacantism.
Sorry?
Ecclesiovacantism.
Okay. What's in the name?
That's the end of the church.
Shakespeare says, arose by any name.
That's a term that the French talk a lot. That's to link the words of the sedevacantism to not the vacancy of the See of Peter, but the vacancy of the church.
Well,
that's the end of the church in the end.
Well, I don't think Archbishop Viganò believes in the vacancy of the church. He believes that's a very serious problem, but I'm quite sure he does not believe that the church has come to a stop or that the church has failed. I mean, our Lord quote, upon this rock I will build my church, and behold, I'm with you until the end of the world. So we have our Lord's guarantee that the Catholic Church will not fail. Even today, when it seems to be failing, it's not failing. Today, it's upheld in little pockets all over the world by Almighty God. God is giving Catholics the faith. He's converting people like Archbishop Viganò. Archbishop Viganò was given great grace by God to see as much as he sees. And he's a tower, he's a light tower at the moment in the church. I don't say he's infallible. I absolutely don't say that. I think he makes mistakes. But he's along with some mistakes, he's a human being. So it's natural he makes mistakes. But along with some mistakes, he's telling a lot of truth, which nobody else is telling. Who else, what other bishop in the whole wide world is saying the things that he's saying? Maybe your resistance bishops, our resistance bishops, in their own little way, yes, but they haven't got a worldwide audience like Archbishop Viganò has, because he's a true man of the church. And it's not the bogus excommunication which stops him from being a tower of light. He's saying magnificent things. He said about the American election, you must have seen what he said there. It was very good. He said it's not just the Democratic Party against the Republican Party. It's much bigger than that. It's the very principle of liberalism which is at stake. Kamala Harris completely believed in liberalism and in all its stupid and crazy principles. A foolish, foolish liberty. President Trump has still some common sense, even if he doesn't understand the whole battle which is at stake.
So, yes, I understand it perfectly. We can say that he is a bishop of the resistance, though. That's one of the questions I made. That Father Chazal told that he was now a bishop of the resistance.
What's in a name? A rose by any name will smell as sweet, says Shakespeare. Somebody defending the faith, defending the Catholic faith against the wicked and stupid modern world is a good man. Call him what name you like. Call him sedevacantist if you like or not. Call him resistance or not if you like it. Those are words. I think they're useful words. I don't think he's a dogmatic sedevacantist. I don't think he believes you have to be a sedevacantist in order to be Catholic. I don't believe that's him. Maybe he thinks that, but I don't think so. I saw him quite recently. I was in Italy and I went to see him. I went to visit him quite briefly. We spoke for maybe a couple of hours, not much more. And I find him, he's not a man of theory, he's a man of practice. So you can't say he doesn't believe that he's a practical sedevacantist, but I don't think he's a theoretical sedevacantist. I don't think. He's not a man of theory. He certainly thinks, he certainly observes, he certainly believes. He believes what the Catholics believe. He's got the Catholic faith, but he's not a theoretical, dogmatic sedevacantist. I don't think so. I think he has too much sense of the church to be like that. That's just my opinion. If you asked him himself, is he a sedevacantist, he will. I don't know what he would answer. I haven't asked him that question myself, point blank.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, okay, I understand perfectly. That were a helpful clarification on your part, and I appreciate that.
Yes.
And that's very meaningful and it's understandable. So, if I may, a topic that has come up frequently here in Brazil, I think only in Brazil, is the accusation that you are a Duginist. Some people somewhat absurdly associate that you are a Duginist. They associate you with the ideas of Alexandr Dugin, when not you, Dom Curzio and Archbishop Viganò, linking all of you to Dugin's ideology and even suggesting that Viganò is financed by Steve Bannon. My question is, how can we respond to this?
Well, it's all. I don't think there's any basis for it. Where's the evidence? Where's the evidence that I know anything about Dugin at all? I've written briefly about him in one Raison Comments. I think he came up and I agreed with a number of his ideas. Does that make me a Duginist?
I think not. For example, even someone like Olavo de Carvalho could have been prized by Archbishop Lefebvre for some of his statements. To say a broken clock is right twice a day doesn't imply that you assent to its entire worldview, to its entire doctrine.
Well, there you are. There you are. That's a good way of putting it. That's a famous way of putting it. A broken clock is right twice a day. Yes. I mean, I think Dugin, I don't know much about him. I did write about, you might find it in Laser Comments, which I did write something about him, and I generally approved because I think there's a lot of what he says makes sense. I think he's a man of tradition, and he's certainly a thinker. He observes the world around him. He observes the world in Russia, especially. He's accused of being a close collaborator of President Putin. I think that's denied inside Russia, or Putin denies that, or the circles around Putin deny that. But he sees. I think he's a thinker. He thinks for himself. He watches everything that Putin is doing. He approves of a lot of it. Not everything. Certainly not everything. I'm sure he doesn't approve of everything that Putin is doing. But I think there's a lot of truth in what he says, because he's coming to traditional positions from, I think, having been a liberal. I'm not sure, but I think he's one of those who's converted from liberalism, I think, in which case he's bound to be right in quite a lot of things.
The case is that his doctrine is perennialist, and what to not be unwilling, unpolite. When I said that it isn't truth, is that he's a big guy, but not so big at the point that the propaganda of like the media try to put him, to color him. He is important, but not so much at the point to like comment.
Well, there you are.
The
vile media. Who can trust the media? The media are liars, 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 constantly stirring up lies, because that's where they come from. The media are liberal. The priests are the journalists, the makers of the media are the priests of liberalism. So what do you expect them to say? What do you expect to hear from them? They lie all the time. The media can hardly be trusted at all. The moment the media says that somebody is bad, you can be pretty sure there's something good about him. The media don't like Dugin because he's not a liberal. Or maybe he's partly liberal still. I don't know. I don't know him. I don't know what he stands for. I've never studied his case. I have sympathies with him because as you say, he's a perennialist. He wants what's perennial. He wants what goes back a long time then. Is that right? Is that why he's called a perennialist? I don't know.
No, perennialist is René Guénon doctrine.
I'm sorry, what?
René Guénon doctrine.
Something doctrine.
René Guénon.
Guénon. What's René?
You don't know him?
Hegel.
No, René.
You're saying Hegel?
No, that's a friend.
René?
Guénon.
René Guénon.
Guénon.
Yes?
Yes, bien entendido.
I've got no idea. I have no idea in my head of the ideas of René Guénon. No idea. All I know is that he's, I think, traditional without being Catholic. That's all I know about him. But I don't think he's really traditional.
So that's the same, in parts, that's the same doctrine followed by Dugin. That's the problem that people in Brazil try to imply you with him. That's the problem.
Well, be careful, be careful of what people say, because if anyone wants to know, really wants to know what I think, they can read, there are 3 volumes of back issues of Elays and Comments. If they base what they say on what they read in those 3 volumes, then I will answer for what I think. But I can't answer for what people attribute to me when I don't think it.
So perfect. And can I end this interview by one last stupid question? That's the most stupid question I can make.
Go ahead.
Are you a Rosacrucian Freemason because of your coat of arms? I write you in email. They are saying that. That's not a joke. They are really saying that.
This is the devil. The devil's stirring up things. Rosicrucian, it's a cross. Am I allowed to believe in the cross?
Yes, of
course. Or no?
Yes, of course.
Okay, good. Okay. So there's a cross, and then there's a rose on the cross. Yes?
Yes. That's a symbol of England.
The rose is the flower of England. Am I allowed to love the flower of England?
Of course.
Then I put the rose on the cross without thinking of Rosicrucianism. I never imagined anything remotely connected with Rosicrucianism. Can you believe me?
Yes, of course. All the bishops consecrated, they have put on their coat of arms symbols of their countries, their own countries.
There you are. There you are.
Galarreta, Felé, all of them put it in kind of, in any way, some reference to their own country.
That's it. You've got the answer. So the rose and the cross just happen to coincide. In my case, I never thought of Rosicrucianism. If I'd thought of it, I might have changed it. I might have put something else, but it's got nothing to do with Rosicrucianism. It's just a rose for my country and the cross for my religion. Yes?
Yes. No, for me it's very simple, but I'm questioning that for them, not for me. I'm okay.
Yes, I understand. You said it's the silliest question you can think of. Fair
Yes.
enough. I'm not objecting. But
So
there it is. Just tell them to go to hell.
that's the best answer we can give them. So thank you very much, Alexis, for sharing your time and insights. I'm very grateful for having the opportunity to discuss those topics with
Sure.
you. I'm sure
Sure.
many of the faithful will greatly appreciate hearing your views and your sayings. So thank you very much for being here today. That was
Okay.
a great
Okay, very good.
honor to me. You have something
Okay.
to say to Brazil, for the traditionalists of Brazil?
The last thing I would say is pray the rosary, because that is putting power in the hands of the Mother of God, and the Mother of God will never do anything to lead any soul into hell. Everything she does is for her Son, to help him to get souls to heaven. Therefore, any power that we give to the Mother of God is in the right place. There couldn't be a better place to give power to, or better person to give power to, because our prayers give her strength to ask for her Son, her divine Son, for graces. She doesn't want it for herself. Everything we give to her goes straight to her Son for the salvation of souls. And that's the most important thing we can do today. The politics are shot, the medicine is shot, the law is shot, the universities and schools are shot, the Catholic Church men, not the church, but the church men are shot to a huge extent, not to a complete extent. But the Mother of God is not shot. Do you understand the expression shot?
Yes,
Finished, kaput, useless. So, everything else is shot, but not the Mother of God. Therefore, pray the rosary. Pray 5 mysteries a day with the family, with the dad, with the father on his knees in front, leading. Not the mother leading, the father leading in the family. And then, unless he's just out of it, unless he's got no faith at all, let the father lead the family rosary. And then let adults, if they possibly can, pray not 5, but 15 mysteries a day, because the situation is so serious. And the best that anybody can do, and they can do it, is to pray the rosary. That's my last word.